Creation myths serve as foundational narratives that serve the religious, philosophical, and cultural frameworks of societies. These myths address fundamental questions about the origins of the universe, the nature of humanity, and the relationship between the divine and the material world. Whilst narratives, concepts, and the lifestyles of the devout do vary across many of the major religions throughout history, it is interesting to see where much of the mythos across these religions share certain tropes, notions, or even rely on similar plot devices in order to explain just how things got started. Human beings have always sought to understand their origins and place in the cosmos, and creation stories have been central to this quest. Despite arising from different geographical, cultural, and historical contexts, these narratives often share striking similarities. Common elements include the transition from primordial chaos to an ordered cosmos, the presence of a supreme or significant creative force, the creation of humanity with a specific role or purpose, and the establishment of a moral and ethical structure which guides human behaviour. In today's episode, we'll be analysing the similarities and differences between these religious narratives, and perhaps highlight where the original writers were inspired by religions that pre-existed their own, and where they deviated entirely, establishing their stories as well as their beliefs as independent and unique. Going as far back as Mesopotamian times, the surviving evidence in the form of poems and epics from the 3rd millennium to the end of the 1st millennium BC shows us that whilst the gods were always responsible for the creation of man and the creation of the world, there wasn't a single unified idea that everyone believed in, but rather several tales that changed throughout the times of the Sumerians to the Babylonians. One of the main ideas from Mesopotamian culture was that the gods always existed, and that all creation had stemmed from them. In Sumerian traditions, for example, it was understood that one of the earliest goddesses, the personification of the earth itself, Ki, was at one with the sky god Anu. However, their firstborn son Enlil, who would become the principal deity of the pantheon, would tear mother and father apart, in effect divorcing the two entities and thus separating the earth from the sky. This concept was unanimous with later Sumerian poems, such as the Song of the Hoe, a myth that goes on to explain that Enlil commissioned the creation of mankind for the purpose of maintaining the world. By this, humanity were created as workers to provide for the gods, a theme that becomes quite familiar in later texts throughout the Mesopotamian age. In another Sumerian poem known as the Debate Between Grain and Sheep, the earth is presented to us as a vacant landscape, where there are no crops, no animals, and humanity roams the land naked, consuming grass and dirty water. It isn't until the gods decide to upgrade humanity by giving them sustenance in the form of grain, sheep, and goats, do humanity start to capitalize on agriculture and cultivate civilization. In another poem known as the Debate Between Bird and Fish, it wasn't until the god Enki created the Tigris and Euphrates rivers did man have access to a water source. Here Enki also created reed beds, marshes, and streams that were then filled with fish for mankind to forage. Later, in yet another poem known as the Debate Between Winter and Summer, the seasons are established upon Earth by Enlil. By the 2nd millennium, a new Sumerian myth sprouted up in the form of Enki and the World Order, which provides an explanation as to how the world functions on a day-to-day, and by which god is in charge of what feature. Of these responsibilities, the gods oversaw the managing of the waters, the production of crops, the overseeing of architectural plans, the herding of wildlife and domestic animals, as well as the general maintenance of both the earth and the heavens. Later in the story known as Enki and Ninmah, we see a more fleshed out and detailed version of humanity's creation, where it is understood that the reason for humanity's creation is because the gods became tired and disinterested in their responsibilities. In fact, they became so burdened by their daily routine that they convened with the primeval mother goddess Nama in the hopes that she might have a solution. Turning to her son Enki, it was under his instruction that she then began to knead clay and would craft a new race of beings to relieve the gods of their responsibilities, a new race called humanity. Much like the Sumerians, the later Babylonians did not have a single explanation as far as creation went. One of the most well-known texts from this era was the Enuma Elish, a legend that details the usurpation of the principal deity Enlil by that of Marduk. This would reflect the changing of gods that would have transpired in the latter half of the 12th century BC, where Babylon became the cult center of religious festivals, by replacing the former Nippur. Whilst the epic poem is spread over 7 tablets, it is only the first tablet that concerns us in terms of where these ancient people may have believed they had come from. The tablet tells us that in the beginning there was Tiamat, the ocean waters, and her husband Apsu, the freshwater. These two deities merged together and produced several unruly children, those who would become the second generation gods. Now, because of how loud these children became in their father's presence, the father Apsu decided that he'd had enough and wished to silence them for good. When the gods learned of their father's plan, they consulted amongst the wisest of them, which was Ea, formerly known as Enki. Seeking to aid his fellow gods, Ea casts a spell on Apsu so that he falls into a deep sleep. Whilst he is in this state, Ea approaches his father and quickly kills him. Ea then takes his wife Damkina and they give birth to a third generation god in Marduk, who the text tells us was the tallest and strongest of all the pantheon. He is so powerful in fact that he is given control of the air by the sky god Anu and told to use the winds as he pleases. These winds do have consequences however, and Marduk's unrelenting use of them causes much upset amongst many of the gods, who claim they cannot sleep because of how reckless he is with these powers. After tolerating one too many hurricanes, the gods visit Tiamat and request that she defeats Marduk so that they can all get some shut-eye. Tiamat agrees and confronts Marduk with terrifying monsters, those who are led by her new husband Kingu, who Tiamat had since made king of all other gods. After some lengthy battles, Marduk is triumphant over Tiamat and Kingu, and thus promoted to the head of the pantheon, where he can continue to play with the winds as much as he wants. Instead though, Marduk takes interest in something far more morbid, the carcass of his fallen enemy. He takes Tiamat's body and splits her in half, before placing one part in the upper reaches of the atmosphere, which was the heavens and the sky, and the other part in the lower reaches, which would become the earth. Here, Marduk is seen to populate the sky with constellations. He is seen to create the calendar, the moon, the sun, and time itself, and he is seen to pretty much add all the features of the world that you'd have thought were already in place, based on the tale's dramatic confrontations. Now, when the battle is said and done, Marduk is then seen to create humanity by draining the blood of Kingu, which becomes the basis by which we are then manifested, from a dead god's blood. The reason for our creation coincides with the earlier Sumerian tale that the gods no longer wish to complete their daily obligations, and so Marduk made humanity to relieve the gods of their duties. It's also told to us that with Kingu's blood, now humanity, the gods at their temples would never go thirsty because humans would always make offerings to appease them. In a much shorter tale known as Marduk, Creator of the World, we are told that the seas had always existed and predated any other creation. After that, the first things Marduk creates are the cities Eridu, Babylon, conveniently ignoring the previous cult center of Nippur until later, and the temple of Esagil, dedicated to Marduk. In this narrative, everything is then built around Babylon. The very earth itself is shaped by dirt being heaped upon rafts in the waters. Humans, animals, rivers, forests, vegetation and mountains are then incorporated into the grand design and made possible by the divine hand of Marduk. One of the oldest organized faiths, Zoroastrianism combines the dichotomous cosmology of good and evil with an eschatology of one triumphing over the other, good over evil in this case. For over 1,000 years between 600 BC to 650 AD, Zoroastrianism was the official religion of the ancient Iranian Empire, before being brought to a somewhat abrupt end after the Muslim conquest of Persia. After the fall of the Sasanian Empire, Zoroastrians fled from Iran to the Indian subcontinent to seek refuge, where their practice has continued ever since. The most important texts we have from Zoroastrianism are those found within the teachings of the Avesta, those believed to have been written by the Zoroastrian prophet Zoroaster, of whom the religion is named after. On a simple note, there is a proclamation that a being known as Ahura Mazda was the supreme creator of the world and mankind itself. In Zoroastrian myth, it is believed that the universe contained nothing but the deity Ahura Mazda, who lived within the realm of endless light, and the evil spirit Ahriman, who lived in the realm of eternal darkness. To fill this emptiness between the two realms, the deity Ahura Mazda decided to go about creating the earthly elements. He fashioned the sky first, then he made the waters, then he made the earth, that which was flat, with no mountains or valleys. After that came the plants and vegetation, and after that came the animals. It wasn't until all of these elements were manifested did Ahura Mazda create the first man, Gayamad, he who was very tall and very handsome. To assist the first man, he was given fire, the last of Ahura Mazda's creations, for which man could use to cook food and stave off the cold. Now, when the evil spirit Ahriman heard of all these creations, he came out of his dark realm to see it all for himself. Ahura Mazda noticed the spirit and said unto him, "Help my creations and give them your praise, and in doing so, you will become immortal." To this, the evil spirit scoffed and didn't see the sense in helping his creations, nor would he even consider praising them when he was so much more powerful than them. So affronted by Ahura Mazda's creations, Ahriman returned to his dark world and fashioned his own creations, demons, monsters, and all wicked things, for which he would send forth to destroy the creations of light. Having foreseen that Ahriman would do such a thing, Ahura Mazda created several spirits, the Holy Immortals, to protect his creations from the creatures of the dark. When Ahriman learned that these celestial guards had been made to defend against him, he was enraged. He attacked Ahura Mazda's creations immediately and intended to destroy them one by one. They attacked the water, but only brought bitterness to it. They attacked the earth, but only found themselves shaping the mountains and the valleys. They tried to destroy the plants, but only managed to grow thorns instead. To this end, the evil spirit sought to attack man, and brought sadness to his happiness, pain to his pleasure, death to his life. The first human, Gayamad, was struck with sickness and died, and with his passing, Ahriman believed he'd been victorious, for though he'd failed to destroy the water, the earth, or the plants, he had succeeded in destroying man. Unbeknownst to him though, from the bones of Gayamad grew a plant, and after 40 years, a man and a woman sprouted from the plant. Their names were Mashia and Mashiana, and they, believed to be the first mortal humans by which everyone descended, promised to serve Ahura Mazda in the eternal conflict against the evils of Ahriman. Mashia and Mashiana produced 15 sets of twins, and every pair would scatter across the earth, populating and increasing their number. The origins of Gnosticism are unclear at best, though it is believed that the theology of the ancient practice was closely related to that of Judaism and early Christian sects. Some historians believe that the many Gnostic ideas were influenced by the aforementioned Zoroastrianism, but much of Gnosticism is difficult to prove, especially considering that much of the Gnostic writings that were prevalent amongst certain groups in Europe were ultimately destroyed when the fathers of the early church decided that these texts were heresy. As a result of this continent-wide purge, there is very little of the Gnostic narratives and values that survive today. Gnosticism, believed to mean having knowledge in ancient Greek, was believed to have been most prominent in the late 1st century AD, where there was believed to be less of a focus on the one God and more of a focus on the pursuit of personal and spiritual enlightenment, somewhat similar to that of Buddhism. As far as the mythos goes, we are presented with a bold idea that there were several deities, or at least divinely powerful beings, who had all come from a supreme god. The antagonist in much of this mythos becomes the entity known as Yaldabaoth, sometimes associated with the god of the Old Testament, who, whilst creating the world, does so as a crude imitation of what the supreme god was able to manifest. According to the Gnostic text known as the Apocryphon of John, we are told, ironically by Jesus himself as he dictates to John after his crucifixion, of the creation of the world and mankind. Here we are told that in the beginning there was only one being known simply as the Father. The Father was surrounded by what is believed to be spiritual water, and that on one occasion, the Father, alone in existence, gazed into the water and saw his reflection. His reflection transformed into that of Barbelo, his female counterpart, who became known as the Mother, as well as Pronoia, or Forethought, because she was the Father's first thought. Barbelo asked the Father for what would become known as Aeons. These were her children, known as Foreknowledge, Incorruptibility, Life Eternal, and Truth. These were given to her by the Father, and they came into being and glorified both the Father and the Mother. After this, Barbelo conceived a child by the Father, and she gave birth to a spark, a son who was known as the Self-Generated, or even Christ, a name greater than any other. The Father then anointed his Son with his perfect goodness. Just as Barbelo had asked the Father to give her aeons, the Son asked for an aeon of his own, and this was Mind. The Father and Mother agreed, and so Mind arose and glorified the Father and the Mother. Now Mind wanted to bring an aeon into being by the Father's permission, and this was Will, and so Will was brought into existence too, seconded by Word. The Father made the Son the master of all power and truth, and from this Son came the four luminaries, Harmozil, Oriol, Davitai, and Elelith. Each bore 3 additional aeons of their own. Harmozil brought grace, truth, and form. Oriol brought insight, perception, and memory. Davitai brought understanding, love, and idea. Elelith brought perfection, peace, and a curious aeon named Sophia, who was also wisdom. After this, the perfect human, known as Pigadamus, or the Old Adam, was brought into existence. Now, Sophia watched these marvellous creations transpiring around her, and had a desire to give birth to an aeon of her own. However, she acted impulsively, and did not wait for the Father's permission or blessing, but instead created her own entity by herself. Because she had not been guided by the Father, the child she conceived was monstrous and misshapen, with a serpent's body and a lion's head. Disgusted by what she had brought into life, Sophia cast her son out of the divine realm, in the hopes that no one would ever stumble across such a horror. To conceal him further, she placed around the child a shining cloud, and placed him on a throne in the centre of it. With that, she named him Yaldabaoth, or Child of Chaos, but he would become known by other names too, Sakla, Fool, and Samael, the blind god, or later, Yahweh. Now Yaldabaoth mated with the mindlessness within him, and in his lonesome was able to generate 12 archons, demonic beings who would come to rule the earth from the celestial spheres above it. As Yaldabaoth was considered wicked and ignorant, partly because of him being cast out without knowledge and guidance, he assumed that he was the one true god, and that there was no other god beside him. The demonic archons he created multiplied, and soon there were 365 of them, one to rule each day of the year. As Sophia's son, Yaldabaoth had many of the powers of creation under his belt. He was able to create his own material world, a crude imitation of the world above that was ruled by the Father. Due to Yaldabaoth's inexperience and ignorance, however, his version of the world, this earth, was inferior, depraved, and corrupted. When Sophia became aware of this, she was stricken with distress and guilt. She wept and repented for creating such a monster as Yaldabaoth, and eventually went to the father for guidance and forgiveness. The father, full of forgiveness, promised to forgive her and absolve her. First though, she would have to stay in the ninth heaven, the realm that was just above Yaldabaoth, until she had atoned for her sin and mended her deficiency. You see, a part of Sophia was now with Yaldabaoth, which is what enabled him to create, and without that essence, the father would not allow Sophia to return to the supreme realm. During this time, Yaldabaoth and his archons saw the image of Pigodamus, the perfect human, or the old Adam, and decided that they wanted to create one for themselves. However, each time they tried, their creation remained lifeless on the ground, and there was no conceivable way for them to animate it. As this was happening, the Aeons around Sophia came up with a plan that would allow her to deceive Yaldabaoth and retrieve her essence from him, allowing her to return to the father. Emissaries from Sophia would appear to Yaldabaoth and advise him to breathe his spirit into his creation's face, which was also called Adam, after which they assured him the body would awaken and stand up. What they didn't tell him was that by doing this, Yaldabaoth would release Sophia's essence and pass it to Adam, the first man in this realm. As it was now Adam that possessed Sophia's spirit and not Yaldabaoth, Adam was now wiser, more spiritual, and more intellectual than his creators. Yaldabaoth was furious with this deception. He made Adam mortal and trapped him within the Garden of Eden, which was then filled with sumptuous fruits, so as to distract Adam from his true divine nature. Later, when the Archons grew even more envious of Adam, they took his divine insight and housed it into a new being, Eve. When Adam saw Eve, he realized that she was his spiritual counterpart. It is at some point during the two mortals' time, in the Garden of Eden, do they hear the voice of the Son, the one known as Christ. Christ tells Adam and Eve to eat from the tree of knowledge, and that by doing this, they will grow their understanding beyond that of their creators. Infuriated with yet another intervention, Yaldabaoth took Eve and impregnated her with his own wicked son. Then he cast her and Adam out of the garden, to fend for themselves out in the barren land of Earth. 2 sons were born from Eve, Cain and Abel, those who in this version were not Adam's children, but Yaldabaoth's. Much later, Adam and Eve would create their own son together in the form of Seth. Seeing that there was now another being that had been created in the form of Seth, Yaldabaoth was overcome with envy and hatred. There he forced Adam and Eve into drinking what was known as the water of forgetfulness, causing Adam and Eve, and all of their descendants, to forget the knowledge of Sophia and the spiritual power of creation and intellect that man once possessed. However, the water did not erase all notions of this power, but rather it was said to now lay dormant within Adam and Eve, as well as all of their descendants, who among all mankind remain capable of regaining said power. All that is required is Christ to reveal it to them, who had once revealed it to Adam when he was trapped in the Garden of Eden. Stretching as far back as Mesopotamian times, we can certainly see how not only have religions inspired subsequent belief systems throughout time, but also how the narratives of these stories have grown to become independent stories of their own. Yet it's also quite telling how these stories were reflections of the people of the time. For example, historians might say that the ascension of Marduk as the principal deity of the Mesopotamian pantheon was something of a cultural metaphor for the rise of Babylon, and an allusion to its historical dominance and staying power. Likewise, we might also look at the Gnostic attitudes and see how Yaldabaoth may have been akin to the fathers of the early church, who, like Yaldabaoth, wished to purge this secret knowledge and deny it from being accessible. Whilst the creation stories do differ quite dramatically in their telling, they do maintain a unanimous aspect that always sees some being, usually above us, that moulds us and the world from a space of nothingness. Never is the detailing of this creation specific or anyway scientific, and that in itself shows us how these ancient stories were a product of their time, or perhaps a time when the mysteries of the gods were considered simply beyond us. As always guys, if you've enjoyed today's episode, then don't forget to give this video a like and don't forget to subscribe for more content just like this. Until next time.